Guys, wouldn't your wife or girlfriend love it if you treated her to the very best this Christmas? Now you can, with the world's softest pajamas by Pajamagram. Created by a team of pajama experts, the world's softest PJs are lighter than a cloud, softer than a bunny, like cashmere, only better. She'll love how heavenly they feel. Includes free gift packaging and Christmas delivery is guaranteed. So visit pajamagram.com or call 1-800-GIVE-PJs.
This is the Locker Room Podcast.
Danny Graves, Geoff Schwartz, and myself, Sean Farnham. It's the Locker Room here on ESPN Radio. We will get to your phone calls at 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. We just got started with talking about Ezekiel Elliot, his 6-game suspension amid domestic violence case and claims. ESPN, it can't be a case because it's just claims. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. We'll compare rates and get you the best deal, even if it's not with us. Saving you time and money now, that's Progressive. Call or click today, Progressive Insurance. Danny, we didn't get your thoughts, your initial thoughts on this, and we will take some sound from Jason Witten and his thoughts overall on this, and we'll get your phone calls at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. But, Danny, your initial reaction when you saw that the NFL came down 6 games on something that Ezekiel Elliott was never actually charged a criminal crime with?
Well, my initial reaction was, are they suspending him this many games because they know that they're going to reduce it in the appeal process? Now, this domestic violence thing, there's no, I do not condone any of this. I don't think a man should ever put his hands on a woman. I don't know every single fact that happened in this Ezekiel Elliott, these allegations, but to be suspended for 6 games, I know with Major League Baseball, a lot of suspensions start out high because of the appeal process. So is it starting out a little bit high because they know Elliott's going to appeal and he's going to try to reduce these games? Or is the NFL overreacting because they, like Geoff said earlier, they botched the Ray Rice and the Josh Brown cases? You know what I'm saying? So to me, domestic violence should not be in any sport in the world anywhere. But suspending a guy for 6 games, you just wonder what's their motive here. Why they do so many games?
To me, when I look at this, the first thing that stands out to me is what was wrong with the Columbus Police Department. If the NFL can come with such a hard, locked case, why is it that the Columbus Police Department didn't? And why isn't the Columbus Police Department, why isn't anybody asking them, okay, explain this, because in the NFL report, this is what they said. How come you didn't prosecute? I think that's a big question that needs to get answered. I have no problem, actually, with the NFL doing what they did. I have no problem. But I think when you look at the way that the NFL has done other people's cases, comparatively speaking to this one, I think that's where the problem comes in. It's not a problem as far as the suspension goes. I think you need to own up and man up. If you put your hands on a woman, then guess what? You need to be held accountable for it. And if that means you're going to lose $1.4 million, which I think is the amount of total that Ezekiel Elliott will lose over the 6 games, then guess what? Maybe if people telling you have to start acting a little bit better, you have to do things differently than what you've done in the past, and that's your wake-up call, then fine, let this be a wake-up call. But you've got to wake up at some point in time and realize that you are a running back, a star running back in the NFL, and people are going to be watching everything you do. And there are kids that look up to athletes. And we can all pretend that Charles Barkley's old comment, athletes aren't role models. My kids got posters up in their room. The posters aren't up of me, okay? They're his father. They're up of Steph Curry. They're up of other athletes that my kids look up to. And there are kids that wear Ezekiel Elliott's jerseys. They buy them in stores. And if I was a father of a child that had an Ezekiel Elliott jersey, I would really have to think about letting my son continue to wear that jersey based on everything that we've learned and everything that we've been told. Here's what Jason Witten, his teammate, had to say when he was asked about this situation.
I'm not privy to all the information, that's gone on over the last year. And so really to go too far into it, I don't have that information to be able to go that route. But I'd say this. Look, there's no place for a man to put his hand on a woman. And most of you guys know that it's a situation that's I've affected my family as a younger kid, and so put a lot of work and attention, and have a platform to step out and speak on stopping domestic violence.
That's Jason Witten, teammate, obviously, of Ezekiel Elliot. Guys, when you hear Jason talk, there's a pause. As he said, I don't know all the information. He didn't obviously sell out Ezekiel Elliott at any point in time, but our stance is very clear that you do not put your hands on a woman, period. And I think inside the locker room, this is a different way of how we would handle it. Jeff, how would you handle something like this coming down in your locker room?
So I played with Josh Brown. I locker next to Josh. I was not there when the allegations came out against him, and when they suspended him, I was gone in 2016, which was last year. Quite honestly, I don't know how I would handle it. I don't know if it's my place to talk to him separately, privately. I don't know if it was Eli Manning's place to do that as a leader on our team. I think we all agree with what Jason Wynn said, what you have said, what Danny has said. To be honest with you, I don't know how I would handle that in the locker room. I wouldn't confront him about it, but I think if someone asked me like they asked Jason Witten, I would be honest about the way I feel about domestic violence, which is the same like everyone else. Real quick, to Danny's thing about the 6-game suspension, I think this is 6 games, period. He's not winning any appeal. Goodell has been given all the power by the players. Zeke will appeal to Roger Goodell, so it's not happening. Even if they go to court, they might get a stay, and they'll allow Zeke to play for a while till it gets figured out. But he's getting 6 games, and this is what the domestic violence policy is now in the NFL. It's what the personal conduct policy is. I don't see that changing, no matter how much he goes to court or he appeals. It's going to be 6 games, and hopefully, for him, I think they should suspend. I think they should do it now, take the 6 games, and then play the rest of the season.
Danny Graves, Geoff Schwartz, Sean Farnham here on the Locker Room, taking your phone calls at 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Let's go to Zern in Ohio, listening to us on 1410 ESPN. Zern, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thanks for taking my call.
Good. Go ahead.
Hey, 2 points. Number one, someone mentioned earlier saying that, corporations aren't responsible for punishing their employees. You don't see that happen. I had to disagree with that. I work for an organization that has a code of conduct policy, and it's been that way every place I've worked, where they have a code of conduct that they expect you to follow, and they will proceed on that if they believe that you've done something to violate that. And that's a good deal with a lot of corporations and companies, and the NFL is doing that. Now, I will also agree with you guys in that I think the NFL has handled this sloppily, but I think one reason why is because the NFL has been reactive. When the Ray Rice stuff came out with that video evidence that was, was plain and clear, and it was brutal, and when people saw that, the NFL was scrambling. They had no clue what to do because they hadn't thought about it ahead of time, and they still haven't truly gotten it right. So I think the reactions are clunky for them.
Well, and I think, and Zern, I appreciate your phone call, and I think that's, to me, Jeff, I think that's the bigger statement out of all of this, is that the NFL is trying to play catch-up in regards to domestic violence. And Correct. Even in a year where you have Joe Mixon, who looks and appears as if he is going to be a standout for the Cincinnati Bengals. But there was a lot of baggage and a lot of discussion because of what happened with him at Oklahoma. And the NFL doesn't have jurisdiction to come in on that situation, but now has to deal with the consequences of him playing in the NFL, having success, and then trying to figure out how that works and how that molds together.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Danny Graves, Geoff Schwartz, Sean Farnham here in The Locker Room. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. It's Straight Talk. And, of course, our Straight Talk today is going to be focused on my alma mater, UCLA quarterback Josh Rosen, making some comments this past week. Had everybody talking, in particular saying that it's tough to balance football and school. Now, guys, I'm going to go first on this one, if you don't mind, being that it's my school. Do you guys mind?
Go ahead.
Okay,
I don't
good.
mind.
All right, good, because what I'm going to tell you is this. Hogwash, Josh. You know why? School hasn't started yet at UCLA. You know when school starts at UCLA? October. Okay, right. So he's gone through a full month of practice and a third of his actual season. He is talking about balancing in season 8 weeks. 8 weeks. That's it. In the college basketball landscape, we start in October, and when we go on road trips, we don't fly out on a chartered plane that takes off on a Friday and returns back to campus on Saturday night. You're gone, and you miss 4 to 5 days of school in the particular week. If Josh Rosen cannot balance academics and football for 8 weeks, I have concern over how he's going to balance his life at the NFL level. I mean, just plain and simple. You're talking 8 weeks, guys. 8 weeks. It is a challenge, but it is not something that you have to like panic about and be like, oh my gosh, this is so difficult.
Well, I was on quarter system at Oregon, so I totally understand the not going to school. We played 4 games before our first game. It was like a pro schedule. I mean, we were in like a pro schedule. I think what he's trying to say, and he just didn't come out very well, is that you just can't take some classes you want to take, which is in the end is not that hard of an issue. I feel privileged to have played college football on a scholarship. I would never go out and try and pretend that we had it tougher than anyone else. We did not. Now, yes, I mean, there are some issues we couldn't at Oregon. Like, we could not take a business class or a sports marketing class or certain classes because practice was during that time. So you understood that you were limited to some majors. But quite honestly, a lot of guys are there to play football. I did not think I'd go to the NFL. I was there to get an education, and I knew what I wanted to do. And luckily, the classes that I wanted to major in, history and political science, were in the morning. I was able to take them. But if you were someone who wanted to major in business or art or economics, you just couldn't take those classes, and that's a sacrifice you have to make. So I think he was trying to say something like that. It just didn't come out very well. And this is another time when he's said something controversial.
Well, look, to me, Danny, this is what I look at it is like the NCAA tournament is an add-in championship week for your conference tournament is basically 4 weeks that you're not even in school. And when I was at UCLA, we took our finals on the road in a hotel room with a proctor standing over our shoulders. And we missed the reviews. We didn't get to go to tutorial sessions that are also free and academically provided by the universities. And so for me to hear somebody say, like, oh, my gosh, this is so difficult, when I've gone through it, and first of all, basketball's travel is way more extensive than what college football is. You can get through it. You can really get through it. It is not that hard if you have good time management skills. Now, if you're talking about classes that maybe you can't take, you can take those in the off season. And guess what? Coaches will work with you in your off-season workouts around what you have to do academically speaking. There's not a coach that I know that at UCLA wouldn't do that.
Yeah, to me, I agree with Geoff here that I think he worded it probably a little more blatant than he wanted to. Balancing sports and school when you're at a big-time school like UCLA, of course it can't be easy, but there's a lot of people trying to do that. In all the major sports, they're trying to do that. To me, I think, and I'm total opposite from Geoff as far as I went to Miami to play baseball, and that was the only reason why. Academics to me was second, and not that that's a good way to go because I definitely don't feel that way now. I wish I would have been a little more serious about my education, but the point is, he doesn't know how to find the right tutors or find the right help for his school. They need to find it for him, or he needs to figure it out. But you're a college athlete, so you're there for a couple reasons. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to feel sorry for you that you can't balance sports and school.
Well, and I think that's the thing for me when you look at it, whether it's women's soccer, women's volleyball, that are all fall sports. Men's soccer, I believe, is in the fall as well. They're all going through the same thing. Right. Now, obviously, Josh Rosen is on a different level. All right, from the standpoint of what is expected of him and his skill set that he has coming as far as the NFL and the next level that's going to happen for him in April of next year. This isn't going to be a concern because he will be at the NFL. But, how much time is spent by NFL quarterbacks? You're around Eli Manning, Geoff. How much time does he spend at the facility? How much homework and how much research, how much things is he doing to be at the level in which he's expected to be at to be the quarterback of the New York Giants?
Well, a lot. I mean, he's doing it all the time. I think this goes to a different issue a little bit of that we're expecting too much from our college athletes as far as off-the-field preparation for games. It's gotten too serious, and I get why it has. It's a lot of money involved. You've got like Josh Rosen, who's potentially going to be a top draft pick. So he's in his mind, he's thinking to himself, well, I need to do the same hours or put in the same amount of work that Eli Manning does. And look, Eli was there every day between about 6:45 and 7. I would actually eat breakfast with him most days because that's the time I showed up as well. He's watching film film from that time until we obviously go to practice. He's watching film afterwards. We would meet with him as well, in certain days and go over blitz and stuff like that. And I'm sure he took his work home with him. Luckily, in my position as offensive lineman, I didn't have to always take my work home with me. I was able to study at the facility most of the time. And yes, I would often do some film review at home, but I assume that Eli Manning and most elite quarterbacks are studying all the time. And so if you're Josh Rosen, you're trying to do that schedule and do school at the same time. So this is probably where his comments have come from. So maybe we just need to temper expectations down a little bit of what we expect from our college quarterbacks.
Well, you're talking about elite-level quarterbacks. Eli Manning, who you were a teammate with, is a quarterback that has consistently had success in the National Football League. And it makes me think of fantasy football.
Fantasy on the fours.
Yes, want more fantasy news? Turn into ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN Radio, digital, social media, Monday, August 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time through August 15th at 11 p.m. Eastern Time for our fantasy marathon, 28 hours, wall-to-wall fantasy football coverage. Be sure to download and sign up at the ESPN Fantasy Football app and play fantasy football this season. You can sign up at ESPN.com/FFL or download the free fantasy football app. Mike Golic Jr., who will be joining us in just a few, will be part of all 28 hours. There is nobody better for a marathon on ESPN than Mike Golic Jr. I was part of the bracket marathon for college basketball, and watching him on Fantasy Island was absolutely phenomenal. Can't miss television. Of course, he'll be a big part of what we're going to be doing during our fantasy football side. Now, guys, at the last hour we talked about who would you take at number one. Let me ask you this. This year, and we'll start with you, Danny, this year, if you had to pick a sleeper, who would be your sleeper, your guy that you believe that maybe he's a rookie that's going to come out and put up big numbers, or somebody that people is not talking about enough right now?
Oh, gosh. I mean, can I pick a running back?
Sure.
Joe Mixon.
All right.
Who day?
Bengals fan too. I think Joe Mixon is probably a good answer. I like Cooper Kupp from the Rams. He's Eastern Washington guy. He lit up Oregon 2 years ago. He had a touchdown last night on a fumble recovery, randomly enough. But I like him as a sleeper. I think a lot of these guys will see as they continue. Will Mitch Trubisky start? He looked good. Deshaun Watson, I think, will eventually be really good in the NFL. Probably not quite yet. But I like Kupp.
Okay, I'm going to go with a sleeper that's not a rookie. My sleeper is going to be Marcus Mariota. Now, people might say sleeper.
That's not a sleeper.
But, hey, after the knee injury that he suffered on Christmas Eve last year, the leg injury that he suffered on Christmas Eve last year, he got off to a shaky start at the beginning of last year and then started going. I think the Titans are going to have a really good season this year. Am I nuts?
No, I wrote about 2 months ago that Marcus Mariota will be the first spread option college quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I just don't know. I don't think that's a sleeper, though. We understand he's going to be really good, and his leg injury is not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah, but you talk top-tier quarterbacks in the league. I mean, we go with the Rodgers, the Breeze, in the fantasy world. I'm not talking about reality world. I'm talking about fantasy world.
Possibly, but I'm not sure he's a good fantasy guy because they run the ball a lot as well. Like they're a very balanced offense, and they improve their defense. I'm not sure he's going to be a big fantasy points getter. If we're talking just fantasy football, solely, I think NFL-wise he's a great quarterback, but fantasy, I'm not so sure.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out this year as far as the fantasy football stuff, and of course the marathon starting tomorrow. Mike Golic Jr. is going to be joining us.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
It is The Locker Room. Mike Golic Jr., Geoff Schwartz, Danny Graves here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And new from Barbasol, premium disposable razors, quite possibly the best thing to happen to Barbasol since shaving cream. You're looking good, America. You're shaving with Barbasol. And we just got done talking a little Josh Rosen, some stuff from the world of NCAA football. And now we get to put Danny to work a little bit because we got some baseball going on here, so we're going to lean on our resident baseball expert. But we know this week some big news involving Derek Jeter, Michael Jordan, involved in the group buying the Marlins for a reported $1.2 billion. And we know Derek Jeter's name was associated with, certainly before, with Jeb Bush and a group interested in buying this, but now it appears getting ready to go through it. And Danny, I'd want to start with you as a guy who was in one of these locker rooms and so can certainly understand maybe some of what the Marlins guys have gone through. And we know with Jeffrey Lurie there, it hasn't always been the easiest thing in the world. But when you see not only a former player involved in this who's going to be involved in a lot of the baseball decision-making, it sounds like, but one with the cloud of a Derek Jeter, what goes through your mind?
Very ecstatic if I'm a player in that locker room right now. I think just for a few reasons, because now you know that the Marlins organization is going to try to win, and they're not going to just try to win a little bit and then trade guys off and then rebuild and then try to win and so on and so on. That's kind of what they've done their whole existence in Major League Baseball. Derek Jeter, obviously, no doubt about it, his resume, what he's done for baseball, all the championships. But to me, the biggest thing, the first thing I thought of was Derek Jeter is old school. So, and I'm probably going to catch a lot of slack for this comment, I hate sabermetrics. And guess what? Derek Jeter hates it too. And now this is going to bring old school baseball back to Major League Baseball. Now we're going to see probably it's going to start with the Marlins. They're going to start hit and run. They're going to steal more bases. They're going to move guys over. The little things of baseball that kind of is a lost art right now. Everybody just wants to hit home runs, and they don't care if they strike out 200 times. They just know that if they hit a home run, they're going to make huge, huge dollars at the end of the day. Derek Jeter is all about small ball and being a team player. So when he does this with the Marlins, the 29 other teams are going to see how successful he is doing this, and hopefully they'll get rid of all the sabermetrics too, because I cannot stand the fact that it's all about numbers. It's all about what the certain percentages say instead of how you react on the field when you're playing, or if you're a manager in the dugout, what kind of moves you make. So, sorry, I just got a little heated up right there. I had to throw that out there. I've been waiting for this segment the whole morning just to get this off my chest because I cannot stand sabermetrics.
I knew we'd be speaking your language talking baseball, but I didn't understand the war on sabermetrics was going to come here. So I'm very much here for this, but it's an interesting conversation because it's one that's starting to branch out into other areas. I know just looking at the NFL and my sport of football and kind of seeing how the conversation has begun in this area because you've had Paul DePodesta and that group joining the Browns front office and the things that we've seen there. Jeff, I'd be interested, are you as averse to this idea of maybe not full-on sabermetrics, considering how the differences in the sports are and how varied they can be, but of the idea of numbers and maybe this more analytic-driven style of thinking starting to seep into football in a much more public way?
Well, I understand the point of using numbers to help you scout somebody, but you still have to watch the film, especially in the NFL. Like it's still a film-based evaluation system. You can grade the players, which obviously PFF does, and I like certain parts of them. I don't like the way they grade offensive linemen. It's very public. We know about this. But the teams doing that themselves, I don't know how they're doing it in-house, but you have to still watch the film. You can't put a number on everything, and numbers can help you back up what you've seen on film. And that's what I use them for a lot of time. I'll watch film with somebody. Okay, this is what I think of them. Here's what other people are grading them as. Here's whatever their production number is for whatever thing. Here's another stat. But that normally backs up what I've seen on film already. So I get what the Browns are doing. They're accumulating a lot of these draft picks, but it has to pay off at some point. And look, you can have all the sabermetrics you want. If they do not have a quarterback, it does not matter how they build their team. They will not win without a quarterback. And how much sabermetrics play into that, Moneyball play into that. Will they draft a quarterback next year? One of these top three guys, and Allen and Darno and Rosen. But I get the point of them if it's used to back up what you see on film.
Yeah, I think, and that's one of the problems that often gets made. It's the locker room here. Mike Golic Jr., Geoff Schwartz, and Danny Graves on ESPN Radio. I think one of the problems that often comes up is on both sides. I think the idea of egos can overrun what's actually taking place in a lot of instances, or what should take place, because if you've got either side that's so caught up in theirs being the only right one, that it can defeat the purpose of these two things being able to live together. Because I'm with you, Jeff. It should ultimately come down to, all right, what are our philosophies as a team? What are the things things that we know we do well with our personnel, and how can we use the numbers and the data about different guys around the field to make sure that if it's roster and personnel moves, we're making sure we bring in guys that fit our philosophy and fit our system, that are backed up by the things we see on the field, to the point where it's not a full-on replacement, because I think that's what guys get worried about. And Danny, you can correct me when I'm wrong, but I think what I'm hearing from you is there's a worry that this movement is overhauling completely a system and leaving out a lot of the traditional baseball guys instead of incorporating them and working with them together.
Exactly right, Mike. And I think it goes to where, for an example here, we've seen all these shifts in Major League Baseball where they have the whole infield on one side of the infield for a dead pull hitter. Well, these numbers are taken from an overall amount of at-bats by this particular batter, but it's not all of the same pitcher. You know what I'm saying? So now if you got me, for example, I was a ground ball pitcher, and then you have Aroldis Chapman, who's a strikeout guy, you're not going to play the infield in the same exact spots as you do for him and you do for me. Or, like Geoff said, if you don't have a quarterback, these numbers aren't going to work for you. Well, if you don't have a pitcher that can hit his spots and throw the ball where he's supposed to throw it, it's not going to work for you. And then you have another aspect of the run differential. I know this is big around Major League Baseball. People talk about this all the time, but take, for example, a 3-game series. If the Yankees win 1-0, and lose 10-2, well, their run differential, to me, it makes no sense. You still win 2 games, but the run differential, you're -8 now. You know what I'm saying? So all these different numbers are just kind of thrown in there for no particular reason at all, instead of just doing it like you did in old school. See what you see with your eyes and see who can play at certain points of the game. See who you can bring in after a guy's throwing 110 pitches. So to me, I just think we need to get back to letting our eyes tell us what we're going to do and letting instinct take over again.
And you see that comes with trust, and it sounds like there would be a level of trust with bringing a guy like Derek Jeter in because of that. And certainly, I've seen it in football, so has Geoff, where you see a coach or someone working in the front office. I mean, John Elway out in Denver, I'm sure, is a perfect example there of saying, all right, this guy at least understands the things that I've dealt with, and there's always a comfort level in that. So especially knowing it's one of the sport's greats. I mean, Geoff, you've been around this a long time. I mean, seeing a guy, if you were in that Broncos organization, like John Elway roaming the hallway, and understand that not only did he face the same challenges as you, but he understands what it takes to win at that level. Is there something about that relaxes guys in the locker room, or maybe puts more trust in general? And all right, I see the moves that we're making, and I know who's driving it and what his resume is in my particular field, and that helps me sleep better.
Oh, it totally does, especially in football. A guy like John Elway, who's won Super Bowls, he knows what it takes to get to the mountaintop. He knows how, players and the ups and downs. I think with Derek Jeter, Derek Jeter to me feels a lot like Magic Johnson did with the Dodgers. He's a figurehead, right? He's going to make people happy in the facility. He's going to make people want to come to the games. He's going to schmooze. He's not making decisions, but he's just a face for the team to make the players comfortable, make the fans comfortable, and like you said, for players and fans and the public to think they're in the right direction. And I think it's smart by him. I think it's smart by the Marlins ownership group, the new ownership group eventually when it happens to include Jeter in this purchase, and I think it'll go well for the Marlins.
Yeah, I think listen, I think ultimately, especially in a city like that where obviously you're fighting an uphill battle in a lot of ways, you bring up Magic Johnson, it actually reminds me a lot of what we're seeing in L.A. with Magic Johnson right now, back being a part of the Lakers. Obviously, he's going to be much more involved in the decision-making, but you hear that Derek Jeter is actually going to play more of a hand in that than I expected at this point from someone buying into the ownership group. So I think in that regard, you wonder, does it help you attract free agents? Does it help you bring in guys that otherwise wouldn't? Or does it attract more fan access there, considering you have so many alternatives in that city? But we've seen the Miami Heat, especially at the height of their powers, be able to bring in a fan base there and captivate that audience. And so maybe you've already got a bona fide stud like Giancarlo Stanton down there. Maybe you can build on some of that. And now that there's a little bit of trust, not only more within the locker room, but with the fan base too, that certainly had good reason not to trust ownership for a while. Maybe this becomes some more of a bridge for them than anything else.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
During the break, we got to spitballing a little bit, and somehow getting to favorite stadiums around the country, and I was very interested because Danny started talking about his affinity for Dodger Stadium, and the one thing that he looked forward to most when going to play there was?
The showers. Crazy, amazing water pressure in the showers. And there was only a few showers there. Nowadays, the showers in the big league clubhouses, there's like 10 or 12 of them. Dodger Stadium at that time had like 6 showers, but the water pressure was phenomenal, and it felt so good. It was like a massage. But I also liked Dodger Stadium because a few reasons. Vince Scully, of course. Yes. And then the grass, the playing surface at Dodger Stadium was so perfectly manicured, and it was so just comfortable to lay on. I would go to the park early, In-N-Out Burger, lay on the grass, and then pregame, Dodger Dog. I'm telling you, there was a perfect routine every time we went to Dodger Stadium. Beautiful, beautiful place.
Nothing better than taking advantage of the local eats while you're in those different spots, especially out there on the West Coast. Geoff, did you have a favorite that came to mind immediately when you started hearing this conversation? Because all these amenities matter when you're going around, especially on the road.
Yeah, I wasn't so much into amenities. I like atmosphere. So I have this weird fascination with stadiums. I love the way they look and the architecture and how they're made. So Lambeau Field to me was probably 1A for me, just seeing the old bowl, then seeing where they built on top of it and knowing that's football, right? Lambeau Field. I played a playoff game in Lambeau. Now, we lost 27-3. It wasn't very exciting, but I played a playoff game in Lambeau. That's pretty cool. And then I love Seattle, okay? I like being in hostile environments. I think it makes you focus. It brings your team together. And I didn't mind going ever to play. Now, I never won in Seattle. I actually got beaten pretty badly both times I was there. But I just like the feel, the vibe of Seattle. Reminds me of going to school at Oregon in Autzen Stadium. But I never minded the hostileness. I think that brought the team together. So I don't remember the water pressure except Oakland, the O.co, which is a terrible stadium. And
awful.
And Danny, so how about this? The NFL locker room for the visiting team was the clubhouse for baseball. We just shared your clubhouse.
It's tiny.
We had 53 guys we traveled with, and we had to use the same clubhouse that baseball used, the same one that has the sewer overflows all the time.
Yeah,
the same one that has
stinky.
like three showers in it. That's the same one that pro football players use. That we went there. So that place is a dump. I wish Oakland stayed in Oakland, but I get why they want a brand new stadium in Vegas.
Can I tell you where a dump was real quick? When I first got called up to AAA in 1995, it was in Indianapolis, and it was the old Busch Stadium where they filmed 8 Men Out. So I walk into the clubhouse thinking, this is awesome. I'm in AAA now, one step away from the big leagues. I walk into the showers, the first thing you see. On the floor in the shower was a full chicken being thawed out by the shower. That was our dinner that night. That was our spread. No. Welcome to AAA.
Did you guys eat? So you guys ate after the game in the locker room, right?
Yes, unless you wanted to go somewhere else to eat. But when you're in the minor leagues, you have no money, so you're pretty much eating whatever they give you.
Even in the pros, they had food literally in the locker room for you guys?
Oh, there's food all day long, Geoff.
Oh, man.
Food. Now, there used to be beer in there. I don't think they do that much anymore. But
no, yeah, those are the kind of stories I heard from when my dad was playing, where they'd hand you 2 beers when you got on the flight after games, which somehow went out of style.
Well, we would make the rookies carry a bunch of bags of beer for us to bring on the plane.
Mike, we still found ways to sneak some alcohol on the plane if you wanted it. There were still ways to get around it, but it's not as widely accepted as it used to be, where when I came in first to NFL, everyone's drinking in the back of the airplane. And it's a way to wind down, honestly, after 3 hours of physical combat. I don't drink. The only time, I tell you what, the last time I had a drink was after a football game on the airplane. I needed to relax. I couldn't relax. I was so wired up. I just was like, 3 hours of combat. Like your body's just kind of in shock. And I was like, I asked the flight attendant, I said, do you have something? And they luckily had something, and I drank. I had to do it. I mean, you just have to calm your body down.
Yeah, you need a little something to take the edge off. I'm with you, and obviously there's varying degrees of that for guys, but you're right. You're able to find ways around that system if you really want to. The best story around that I ever heard as far as on a plane was from my dad. He said Jerome Brown used to be the king of that, old Eagles defensive lineman. and would get on the plane and had a briefcase that actually had nozzles that came out of the back end that had different bottles of liquor inside it that he would pour up while they were playing cards. So that is, they say you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. There was never any failure to prepare in that vein on the part of Jerome Brown. The stadium vein, too, Jeff, you mentioned it, but obviously my time in the NFL a little more brief, but my last preseason game that I played with the Saints was at Green Bay. And such a testament just to that as a sports town in general. This was preseason 4, where it was guys like me on the very back end of the roster trying to slave away and get a job the best way I could in that game. That stadium was still full to capacity. That town shut down like a Texas high school football town for that game. Someone else had, I don't know who was making the cheese curds or pouring the beer at the time, but they weren't doing it anywhere outside of that stadium. So it was a really cool environment. You've got that small concrete tunnel coming out into the stadium. One tunnel for everyone to come out of, and you heard about it going in, but to be there and feel almost that claustrophobia when you're coming out there and sort of hear the ghosts of the past coming through Lambeau was definitely an experience, regardless of the setting around it, that I'll always remember from that one. Unfortunately, no one was thawing any chickens in the locker room at that time. So,
but isn't it so cool, too, with Lambeau? I think New England's this way with Gillette Stadium, where you're in a neighborhood. You're just driving in a neighborhood like you would in any of the cities we live in, and all of a sudden you make a right-hand turn, and there's Lambeau Field, just the middle of the city. It's remarkable to me.
It really is. It's interesting how accessible it is in that vein, and that was kind of how I always felt about Notre Dame Stadium. But Danny, I remember going to play my junior year at Notre Dame. We played Army in a game at the new Yankee Stadium, and that one feels so much different. You realize you're kind of walking into a palace and kind of a shrine to baseball royalty in there. It has such a different feel to it.
It is a different feel. I haven't been into the new Yankee Stadium, but playing in the old Yankee Stadium, it's almost like I felt like I didn't belong there because of the monument out there and just being a part of history. Like, to me, I was just in awe the whole time. It was absolutely amazing.
No, it really was, and that was the one thing we had to guard against. I mean, we're going out there to play a football game the following day, but we get there on Friday, and you get there and you go and do a walkthrough once you got in from the airport and go over and shake it out and get ready for what you're going to do tomorrow. And our coaching staff actually made the executive decision. They said, you know what, we're gonna can the walkthrough. It was a night game the next day. We'll do it in the morning. They wanted to give us the chance to go around and really experience every part of that stadium. So we're in the locker room having one of the managers tell us which locker each of us had. We found out that Tommy Reese, our quarterback at the time, had Derek Jeter's locker to tie back into before. So we were all razzing him about that. But getting to go out and see Monument Park and take pictures on the diamond was a really cool experience, and it was one I was glad that we got the time to fully explore there, because rarely in all this, as you're so dialed in, do you get to experience it and be a kid.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
It's The Locker Room. Mike Golic Jr., Geoff Schwartz, and Danny Graves. We've been talking about favorite stadiums. We talked about some stuff with Josh Rosen before, but coming up now in a world that sort of combines both, combines the media and athletics in a way that we're all pretty accustomed to. We saw not too long ago Notre Dame, my former alma mater, released a new set of media rules and restrictions for their practices coming up this fall. Some of the rules include no referencing plays run or game strategy. This includes describing formation, personnel groups, non-conventional plays, no reporting of which players are practicing with individual units, goal line offense, nickel defense. They may know which players are practicing as well as who are not, may include non-strategy related observations, do not report on practice injuries until the team has provided an additional official update on this, and don't quote, paraphrase, or report comments made by coaches or players during a practice session. So, Jeff, I want to start with you. What did you make of these original rules put out by Notre Dame, especially now in light of the fact that we're hearing LSU is going to be implementing some very similar rules coming up this fall, as far as this being a potential trend?
It's just overbearing. It's overreaction. It's I just don't like it. I think that reporters know in general that they're not allowed to discuss strategy. NFL reporters watch every camp practice open to them.
Fantasy on the fours.
Well, Jeff, we'll let you get back to that point in a second because it's time for Fantasy on the Fours. Great job by Devin and company there, completely ramrodding this segment with some fantasy news. And if you want more fantasy news, tune into ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN Radio, digital, and social media on Monday, August 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's tomorrow, all the way up until 11 p.m. Eastern on August 15th for our ESPN Fantasy Marathon. You can catch Sarah Spain and myself all throughout the marathon for 28 hours of wall-to-wall fantasy football coverage. Be sure to also download and sign up to use the ESPN Fantasy Football app to play fantasy football this season. You can sign up at ESPN.com/FFL or download the free fantasy football app. It's the number one fantasy app, 13 million players last October. This is the 22nd year running for ESPN Fantasy Football. You can sign up and play at ESPN.com/FFL. Works on Android, iPhone, iPad, all of those different places. You can play in a private league, join a public league with friends, playing up to 25 leagues, and the best part is it's absolutely free. So me and Sarah Spain will be holding it down on Fantasy Island again for you guys this year. Stu Gatz could not be bothered with such trivial garbage, and so they've left it to myself, who's somehow weirdly become the stay up 24 hours guy as the young pup at the organization. So glad we would ramrod everyone's segment, Fantasy at the Fours. So Jeff, Danny, I'm sure you guys thoroughly enjoyed me spouting off in the middle of your coherent point, Jeff.
You did a great job. I'm proud of you. You were ready. You were ready for it to happen. But back to the conversation. I just no, seriously. Like I think it's too much. You can the media generally, especially in college towns, and maybe you can speak to this. Having gone to Notre Dame and I went to Oregon, a small college town as well. They want your program to do well. They want to shine a good light on your players, on practice. They want to give the fans positivity heading into the season. And you're basically cutting all of that out. You're cutting out the access. You're cutting out the fans to be able to learn about your players. And then I think when things go bad, and they might go bad in Notre Dame this year, and you can talk about that as well, Mike, they're not going to give Brian Kelly the benefit of the doubt when he didn't allow them to do their job for the entire month when they had training camp.
Yeah, no, I think it's a worthwhile point, and I think especially the point that gets really troublesome and problematic for me is the idea of not reporting on practice injuries until the team has provided an official update because, listen, while I know the people at Notre Dame involved in all this, and so I know that more often than not they're operating with the best interests of the student-athlete in mind and aren't going to use this to their disadvantage, but this as a general rule opens it up to, all right, what if, X, Y, or Z university all of a sudden has an injury that they don't report to the media and now aren't beholden to and aren't held accountable by anyone when it comes to putting a player back on the field with an injury when they're not ready or in a position that's compromising to them. Just the rabbit hole that this goes down eventually if you start taking these rules and taking them out to their eventuality. Danny, I don't know how you feel about this, but to me that portion of it is probably the most troubling.
Yeah, I think when you try to cut the media out of talking to these players, going back to what Jeff said, it's like, how do the small college towns get to know these players, the new players coming in, or what kind of people they are? They're not just robots out there playing college football. They're human beings, and that's how you find out what type of people they are, through the media. And I don't, I would hope that most college kids are smart enough not to tell the media what their plays are or what their game plan is for the upcoming week or who's injured or who's not injured. I just think that it's tough to take their voice away by just automatically saying there's this limited media availability.
Mike Golic Jr., Geoff Schwartz, Danny Graves here in the locker room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. And, yeah, I'm with you. The media is a tool, right, that coaches and teams and players all use to help communicate their message, communicate the things that they want out there to their fan base and to the general public. And when you use it the right way, and Jeff, I agree with you, especially the point about the local writers and the beat writers surrounding the team. Those are the ones that spend the most time with guys. Those are the ones that you end up forming relationships with along the way because you have an understanding that those guys, especially the national media, when it gets to that level, obviously is going to come in with their story in mind, and then it gets a little more complicated. But especially with the local guys, they're around you so much that it doesn't benefit them to try and undermine you or go after guys in a way that compromises what that relationship is all about, at least in my mind. I mean, Jeff, I have to imagine along the way you had plenty of guys in the media that you ended up being comfortable with along the way, enough to share a lot of the information that was coming out. Not the pertinent information, but the stuff that was going to help them better know you and the team.
Well, of course. I mean, you become, friendly with the media over time because you deal with them quite often. There's a lot of people that even I rely on now that I'm in the media, that, for confirming stories or getting scoops or talking about a certain team scheme and whatnot. I also think that we're giving a little bit too much credit to people understanding schemes of football. I've never found a reporter to really be sitting there saying, okay, well, look, the left tackle's at right tackle now. They're running a tackle over, and here comes a power reverse. Like, they're not talking about that. I mean, it's such a large policy for something so minor. And, okay, look, you ran a reverse in practice, they report it, and then the team knows about it, that you're playing. Come on. I mean, it's just so overbearing, and it's paranoia. And I think that you can really do a good job building up relationships with the media. That'll help your program. It'll help promote your program. It'll help promote your kids and get everyone excited about college football season. And they're limiting that excitement by not allowing reporters to do their jobs.
And, Jeff, I think that's a good point. And, Danny, I'd ask you about your experience, because one thing I've always found on any level really is that there does seem to be a certain amount of paranoia that exists in the world of coaching. I mean, I remember even going back to high school, the idea of coaches always being concerned about what cars were coming by the parking lot or who was over in a certain area, because they always thought that somebody was in on our stuff, and that continued on in college. You saw that paranoia pop up all the time. But at the same time, with rules like this, I always see it as kind of an extension of signs in real life. And every time I see a sign, I always imagine, all right, well, something had to happen that they didn't want to happen in this spot enough for people to say, all right, we need a sign to deter this kind of behavior. So do you think this could actually be a reaction to something, or does this smell more like paranoia to you?
Well, yeah, to me personally, I think this is paranoia. And my experience is, man on second, the catcher gives multiple signs because they're all paranoid that the guy at second is going to pick up the signs and relay him. And same thing with third base coach. You go through a bunch of different signs, even if nothing's on, because of paranoia. If you do put something on, that they're going to know exactly what's on. So, I think it is blown a little bit overboard here.
Yeah, no, Danny, I'd agree. And Jeff, to your point earlier, understanding the scenario and the situation that surrounds Notre Dame right now, it kind of mirrors what LSU just went through last year with Les Miles, where you came through an offseason where that directive was given down to show some change and show that you're going to move things along. And to Brian Kelly's credit, there's new coordinators there. There's a lot of new things going on. Maybe this is an overcorrection to guarding what they see as a lot of their new information going into the season, knowing that there's a lot on the line, that there are potentially jobs on the line this fall. It can all get very dicey when those things start to factor into the equation.
Well, it definitely can. But how many trick plays or wrinkles are reporters really going to notice and then tweet about and then the other team read about it? I mean, once you play that first game of the season, everything's out there. I mean, there are plays that you will put in during camp that you might run in week 4 or 5, but that's very rare, honestly. A lot of trick plays and gadgets come up week to week. You don't practice a lot of those getting ready because that's not part of your base offense. You might do it one day. You might have one day where you spend, okay, today's going to be the day that we throw in 5 trick plays, but otherwise not much is going to change. If you're a 3-4 team or 4-3 team, people know that stuff already. So again, overreaction. And I think that coaches need to watch how much they kind of dog the media.
This is The Locker Room on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
Get to end on a pretty fun note here. Now, everyone knows superstition in the world of sports are two things that kind of go hand in hand. I always kind of had the cop-out. I called it a routine as far as what you do on game day, the things that it takes for every guy to get ready. And listen, we've got 2 football players here and a baseball player, and I think between the 3 of us, there's certainly a much more of an association between the sport of baseball and the really kooky superstitions. So, Danny, I feel like we got to look at you on this one. Did you have any of those weird baseball, major league style superstitions that we would see on game day?
Yeah, and here's the thing. You guys got to remember how boring it is in the bullpen, especially for me and a lot of guys that aren't a part of the all 9 innings. So what I would do, I'm just going to tell you my routine once the game started. So from the first inning to the top of the second inning, when the top of the second inning is over, I would choose sunflower seeds. When the top of the second inning would be over, I would throw out the rest of my seeds on the ground if I still had some left, and then I would put in a piece of bubble gum for the bottom of the second. The top of the third, I would put in some Red Man Golden Blend mixed with some bubble gum, chew that for the third inning until the top of the fourth inning is over. The bottom of the fourth inning, I would have bubble gum again. The top of the fifth inning, I would spit out the gum and put in some Copenhagen dip for an inning and a half, and then the bottom of the sixth inning, I would throw in some gum again, and then the top of the seventh inning, I would throw in one last dip of Copenhagen for the full inning. Eighth inning came along, I would chew gum until I had to get ready to go warm up to get in the game. Now, just to clarify, I don't dip or chew anymore. I'm tobacco-free, have been since 2011. But when I was playing, I had to have that specific routine one from the first inning on.
Wow, well, that is OCD to the absolute max.
Big time.
Over the course of a baseball game. I can't claim to have anything near that extravagant. I mean, Jeff, did you have anything even close to that? Because I feel like Danny's going to take the crown in this one.
Yeah, so I grew up playing baseball, so I have a little superstition in me, but not to that extent. I've tried to, over the years, break it. But football, so I had a very specific routine. So let's say the game was at 1 Eastern start, right? We would go out on the field about 12:20. So I'd start my warm-up at 11:30. I'd go out, I had a specific routine I did myself. I get back in about 11:50. I put my pads on 25 minutes before we had to go out. So let's say 11:55. And then I went and taped my hands. And my hands had to be taped a certain way, a specific way. And there was an order. I used 6 different types of tape, including pre-wrap, there's a lot of tape. And then also the tape job had to be no creases in it. It had to be pristine tape job. No
By
creases.
A specific trainer too?
Oh, same guy every time, yeah. Because I wore an actual hard cast on one of my thumbs. Like my thumb is really bad. So we had a little slit on the side to get it in and out, and then I had a thumb piece on the other thumb. So same guy did it. Some places I had a guy for practice, and then I had a different guy for games. And I would get really upset when the trainer wasn't there. There was one time where the trainer couldn't be there in the preseason because he was in school. It fired me up. I didn't like that. But no, so really just no creases. And I put my clothes on the same way every time, but my tape had to be perfect. Like that really bothered. I'd make them start over again if the tape wasn't perfectly flat.
No, and listen, Jeff, I can certainly sympathize with that as a former offensive lineman. And for the exact reason you just mentioned, I actually took the taping into my own hands pretty early on into my college career because I never wanted to have to deal with that person not being around on game day or some of the change that would normally come with those areas. So I always taped my own hands, but I was the same way. I had a very specific ritual as far as, the tape underneath, the white tape on top having to look a certain way, is usually going with even some of the gray blood tape over the top of that. And for me, I was always really particular about the knee braces being one of the last portions of me really getting ready, especially at the college level where we had to wear them. But what would always throw that off is if I ever had to go to the bathroom. That was the one wild card because trying to do that whilst wiggling off and wiggling back on a pair of knee braces once those pants have already vacuum sealed you in is a pretty difficult process, especially for the larger man. So I can definitely empathize there.
Once my pants went on, that wasn't happening anymore. Like that was done for the day. Like that was my mental rule.
Wow.
Oh yeah. So I make sure everything had to be done beforehand, and then pants on. I never once college, NFL, never take my pants off and go to the bathroom.
I had that same thing too. Once I put the jock strap in the cup on, you cannot put it back on to feel the same. So it had to stay that way throughout the rest of the game. And one other thing too, when I would come into the game, every part of when the outfield goes to the infield dirt, then to the infield grass, then to the pitcher's mound dirt, every time I would step onto a different surface, I would have to step with my right foot first. So if you watched me closely, I would have to maneuver my steps to get my right foot on each surface first because I always wanted to get off on the right foot. That was my reasoning.
Taking that very literally. I kind of respect that. See, for me, my one true habit was kind of gross. Is before every game I ever played in, and part of it was certainly nerves, but I mean after a while you play enough football and you play enough to where that's not really the issue, and it just sort of became a force of habit despite me not really eating much the day of, is I always threw up before games.
Oh, you're that guy, huh?
Always. I'd be in the tunnel out in front of Notre Dame Stadium. There's probably still some vomit from me in the back of that tunnel somewhere. So I heard Mark Schlereth tell this story one time when he was with the Denver O-line, so I feel some sort of camaraderie in that. Jeff, I'm guessing you weren't a puke guy, judging by the groans?
No, so the way I basically prepared mentally for the game, and everyone has to do it differently, because football, I tell people this, you have to get yourself into a mindset to be physical for 3 hours straight. So I tried to be as loose as possible. I would smile, I'd joke around, and my coaches probably hated that, but I was never the guy who was ultra nervous, even though I might have been deep down, but I never showed it outwardly.
Thanks for listening to the Locker Room Podcast. Make sure to subscribe by clicking the Listen tab on the ESPN app.